We have another one of our professors. This is Dr. Zoë Wood.
Hi, so I have a pre-slide. So are we ready? It's time. I'm ready.
Here we go.
Okay, so how many of you have ever felt like this? What is this kid feeling like, right? Like he is feeling shame. He has tried to do something and he did it wrong, right? And the truth about shame is that shame is actually one of those feelings that we all feel, but it's one of those worst emotions in the human emotions, right? Because you have failed and you just sit there thinking, why did I even try that? Why did I do that? I knew I was not good enough. Why did I do that? And the heart of shame comes from the feeling of vulnerability. So how many people here associate vulnerability with weakness? There we go, right? Right, because it's feeling you're exposed, right? That's part of what weakness is being exposed. Vulnerability is actually exposure to attack. But then how many of you, just this afternoon, seeing people do these Ignite talks, actually feel like they were courageous? Right? So actually the truth is, right, that being vulnerable, being up here standing in front of you with slides advancing out of your control is actually very courageous. Right? And if we think about vulnerability, vulnerability actually is, from vulnerability comes creativity and innovation. You cannot be creative, you cannot be innovative unless you are vulnerable, unless you take risks. So what does this mean? So this is also, if they study love and vulnerability, some people don't want to get into relationships, they don't want to get married because they're afraid of the loss, right? I don't want to love you, even if I'm going to marry you, someday you're going to die. But then the truth is, when they study long-term couples, that the people who have loved with their whole heart, who are fully vulnerable, are actually the couples that when their partner does finally pass are the least distraught. But if you hold back and you don't love with your whole heart, those are the people who actually are the most psychologically distressed when their partner dies. Part of what that is because vulnerability allows for connection. Well, what does that have to do with computer science? I'm not a computer science professor, I'm not a psychologist. This has to do with the fact that as computer scientists, we interact with a machine that is very, very strict about the rules in which we engage with that machine. And computers are the master of shame. You try to do something and they say, no, you told me the wrong way, I am not doing that. So we spend hours and hours as computer scientists dealing with these masters of shame because we did not do it right. So this weekend, I was writing an assignment before I gave it to my students to write this rasterizer, which brings in a geometric description of an object and then in software, not using the GPU, draws it. And I introduced a bug because I have 2 young kids, I'm doing a bunch of things, it's Easter weekend, I'm trying to code this. So what did I do? I went and did the laundry. Because when you have a bug, it's that shameful moment. I'm a professor of computer science. I should be able to hack this out in the 2 hours I gave myself. But if any of you is reading my code, I hope it's obvious. It's a really long code. That's not the whole program, right? Because the first step in our job as computer scientists is, when we have a bug, is to actually admit you've made a mistake. That's the vulnerability part. That's the hard part. That's the part where you have to say, I was wrong. And then, of course, not only do you have to do that as computer scientists, but even as academics, as students, you are constantly in this world of evaluation. You are constantly being asked to do something. I'm going to ask you to do it, and then I'm going to tell you how well you did it, right? Which is really hard. We're constantly being exposed to this potential for shame, for doing it wrong, for not being good enough, because there's other people in the class who are doing it better than you. And so where does that leave us? That leaves us in this position where we have to really make friends with shame, and we really have to understand that happy people, when psychologists study happy people, they realize that happy people are the people who are vulnerable, who actually expose themselves to risk. They expose themselves. If you're going to have a loving relationship, you have to expose yourself to connections. You have to, if you want to innovate, both technology and business-wise, you have to expose yourself to risk and to vulnerability to be creative. And if you're going to be in relationships, you have to expose yourself to being vulnerable. If you're going to be connected, you have to actually be vulnerable. The really good news, though, is that actually the humans are really wired for this struggle. It's part of, like, if you watch kids love games, they love problem solving. Even though you have that voice inside your head that says you're not good enough, you also have that voice inside your head that says, how do you do that? How do you actually work that out? So when you hear that voice of you're not good enough, you don't go do the laundry, right? You go back and you read your code, which I did eventually do. To make the new things, you have to try the new things and you have to make mistakes. So not only did I draw one bunny, right, I drew 25 bunnies. They're supposed to be upside down, actually. Really. So in conclusion, I just want to say that we all need to remember that successful and happy people make lots and lots of mistakes. And they feel ashamed, and they feel vulnerable, and they keep going. So if that is you, keep squashing those bugs. And one of the best ways to do that is to be courageous, to tell the whole story of who you are. So that means being a computer science professor and standing up in front of a bunch of people and saying that you made a silly bug in order to fix it. And then that's me with my kids, because that's part of why I am as a whole professor, is I'm also a crazy mom. So thank you.